Welcome to Cinematic Excrement. Today, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the Golden Raspberry Awards. I've mentioned the Razzies before on this show. They're sort of the anti-Oscars, poking fun at the worst Hollywood has to offer each year. Or at least that's supposed to be the idea. And while I have found them to be a source of humor in the past, lately, I feel like they've kind of lost the plot. The 38th Golden Raspberry Awards, recognizing films from 2017, were just flat out lame and felt like a waste of time, especially when you look at the acting nominations. One would think the point of awards like Worst Actor would be to nominate people who delivered poor acting performances, but this year it seems they simply nominated actors who starred in subpar movies, regardless of the quality of the actual performance. Some of the nominations were well-deserved. Jamie Dornan was uninspiring as always in 50 Shades Darker, Katherine Heigl was just plain silly and unforgettable, and Johnny Depp's Captain Jack Sparrow shtick is getting old. But how the hell did The Mummy get 3 acting nominations? They had Russell Crowe nominated for Worst Supporting Actor and Sofia Boutella for Worst Supporting Actress, and Tom Cruise won Worst Actor. What kind of happy horse shit is this? The Mummy was a complete mess, but the acting was not the problem. And Boutella was the best part of that movie. Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem also received nominations for Mother! And the title does have an exclamation point, so I assume that is the correct way to say it. It's not Mother, it's Mother! But anyway, the situation with Mother is pretty much identical to The Mummy. I understand why people didn't like the film. I wasn't crazy about it myself. But again, the acting was fine. And I know I've said this already, but fuck the Razzie voters in all of their holes for giving Worst Supporting Actress to Kim Basinger. Hell, I'm not sure any actress in that category actually delivered a bad performance. They just happened to be starring in relatively well-known, critically panned movies. Also, nominating Tyler Perry for Worst Actress may have been funny the first 3 times, but it's starting to get stale. Now, I am hardly the first person to criticize the Razzies, and I doubt I will be the last. They've been getting complaints for years, mostly for laziness, it seems. They tend to primarily focus on more mainstream films rather than other bad movies that may be lesser known, but are arguably more deserving. And I think it has to do with the general makeup of the Golden Raspberry Foundation membership. Unlike the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, whose membership is only by invitation, the privilege of voting for Razzie nominations and awards is available to pretty much any jackass who coughs up the $40 fee. Also, Razzie voters are not required to actually watch the movies they're voting on ahead of time. Although, even if such a rule was in place, I don't know how you would enforce it, so it'd pretty much be on the honor system anyway and probably wouldn't make much of a difference. And sometimes I wonder if they stick to mainstream films because they keep hoping for that occasional celebrity appearance at the award ceremony. And I get it. We all loved it when Halle Berry showed up to accept her Catwoman Razzie in person. She was hilarious and a great sport about the whole thing. But if your goal is to simply whore yourself out to the big stars, then you're really no better than that other awards ceremony you claim to be mocking. And I know the Razzies are not meant to be taken seriously, and admittedly I do feel a little silly criticizing something that's supposed to be a joke. But jokes are supposed to be funny. And after almost 40 years, maybe this joke has run its course. Anyway, you've probably noticed the title of this video is not Why Sean Doesn't Like the Razzies Anymore, and are wondering why I'm still talking about those $5 trophies. I am going somewhere with this, and it has to do with this year's Worst Picture nominations. Baywatch, 50 Shades Darker, The Mummy, Transformers: The Last Night, and the winner, The Emoji Movie. This category seems especially lazy, even by Razzie standards. For one, I don't care what anyone says, The Emoji Movie was not the worst movie of 2017. It wasn't even the worst of the 5 nominees. Transformers and 50 Shades were both far worse. But the problem goes further than that, and it comes back to what I said earlier. There were other movies released in 2017 that were arguably more deserving of a Razzie, but were overlooked because they simply weren't mainstream enough. And we're going to look at one of those movies today, The Book of Henry. This film did not do well with critics at all and currently sits at 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, while audience reactions have been better, but not overwhelmingly so. The screenplay was originally written way back in 1998, and the fact that it took so long to get made is probably not a good sign. It was directed by Colin Trevorrow, who initially had to drop out when he was hired to do Jurassic World, but returned to the project after Jurassic World wrapped. He really wanted to do this movie for some reason. In fact, if you look at the interviews with the cast and crew, they all seem excited about this movie and constantly talk about what a charming and heartwarming story it is. Of course, I'm sure Uma Thurman had some nice things to say about Kill Bill when they were doing publicity for that film. Doesn't change the fact that she was seriously injured due to Tarantino's gross unprofessionalism. So I think it's safe to say you can't necessarily judge someone's honest opinion based on a DVD bonus feature. But anyway, we have what appears to be an enthusiastic director, as well as a cast that ranges from excellent to at least decent. Naomi Watts, Lee Pace, Jaden Lieberher, Jacob Tremblay, Sarah Silverman, Dean Norris. So far, this film shows a lot of promise. So what went wrong? Well, let's take a closer look at the Book of Henry and see if the critics' vitriol was misplaced, or if the Razzies were wrong to snub this film. Lieberher plays Henry Carpenter, an 11-year-old boy living with his mother, played by Watts, and his little brother Peter, played by Tremblay. Dad is played by Sir not appearing in this film because reasons. But Henry isn't just any 11-year-old boy, he is a super genius, almost comically advanced compared to his grade school classmates. So why is he still in grade school and not in some sort of advanced placement program?
Because it's better for my psychosocial development for me to interact with a peer group at a normal school environment.
Wow, said with such conviction. His mother works at a diner and spends her spare time writing children's books, enabling her best friend's alcoholism, and playing Xbox, while Henry spends his spare time building Rube Goldberg machines with his brother and trading stocks. Wait, what? How is an 11-year-old trading stocks? That's illegal! You cannot trade stocks until you're at least 18, or in some states, 21. Now, your parent or legal guardian can of course open an account in your name, but they still have to be the ones to manage it until you're of age. I don't care if he's a super genius, this shit would not fly. So that huge leap in logic is problem number one with this movie. Problem number two, with how advanced beyond his years Henry is and how immature his mother can act at times, this is another one of those movies where the grown-ups act like kids and the kids act like grown-ups. This usually leads to kids and grown-ups alike acting like insufferable little shits, and the Book of Henry is no exception. Even little Peter isn't immune to this buffoonery.
Don't talk to me like that.
Like what?
Like a child.
Excuse you? And then we have problem number three, the time period in which this movie is set. The problem is, I have no idea what the time period is supposed to be. Henry has what appears to be a recent model MacBook, and Mom has an Xbox One, but there's also a scene in this movie where Henry uses a payphone, and another where he pulls out a Polaroid camera. What the hell year is it? The screenplay was written 20 years ago, and it feels like they tried to update it for 2017, but they half-assed it. So certain aspects of the production feel appropriate for the modern day, while others feel like they're stuck in the 1990s. The end result is very confusing. There's a hilarious moment in a behind-the-scenes featurette where one of the people who worked on the film said they wanted it to be timeless. Well, I suppose they succeeded. It is indeed timeless, in that it seems to simultaneously exist in multiple time periods at once. So those problems are certainly troubling, but none of them really scream bad movie to me. They're just signs of mediocrity. There must be something else that really drove people away from the Book of Henry. So let's take a look at the story. Now, you might think the story would have something to do with this super genius kid getting rich off the stock market. Well, he does build up a sizable nest egg, but that's only a subplot. The real plot deals with child abuse. Well, that sounds like fun. The only person in this movie whom the Carpenter boys appear to consider a friend is their next-door neighbor, Christina Sickelman, played by Maddie Ziegler, who you might have seen in a couple of Sia's music videos. Christina lives with her stepfather for reasons, and he has a habit of getting drunk and beating the crap out of her. Or at least that appears to be the case. The depiction of child abuse in this movie is very subtle. Perhaps too subtle. We never actually see Christina's stepfather lay a hand on her. It's only implied. There are even moments where other characters mention unexplained bruises on Christina as a sign of the abuse, but we never really see any of these bruises, presumably because she's covering them with her hair or something. Hell, this movie goes to such great lengths to not show any form of abuse that for a while I thought the big twist was going to be that Henry was mistaken and Christina was never abused at all. But I was wrong. Her stepdad really is getting drunk and beating the crap out of her. The movie is just too afraid to show it. And on the one hand, I get it. Child abuse is a touchy subject, and rightfully so, and one must approach such a subject carefully. On the other hand, there is such a thing as being too careful. After all, the #1 rule of cinema is show, don't tell. And this movie is doing a whole lot of telling. You can take a subtle approach to child abuse, that is fine, but you have to give the audience slightly more than someone looking out their window and going, Henry naturally tries to report this to the school principal, but she's not willing to make a move since the stepfather just happens to be the police commissioner and his brother is the head of social services, so he's pretty much untouchable. Not that it would matter if he wasn't, since everyone in this town seems to turn a blind eye to any kind of abuse. There's a scene where Henry witnesses some douchebag shoving his girl around in the supermarket, and Mom tells him flat out to ignore it.
It's none of our business. It'll only make it worse.
Well, that's a great lesson to teach your kids. If you see something wrong in the world, do nothing. You'll only make it worse. Henry is not deterred by his mother's horrible advice and puts a plan into action to stop the asshole stepfather. Unfortunately, brain cancer. Yeah, this comes right the fuck out of nowhere. Henry has inoperable brain cancer. And then he dies. Interesting choice to kill off your main character halfway through the movie. I'm starting to see why this movie wasn't terribly popular. Fortunately, before his death, Henry put together an audio cassette. What year is it? And a notebook with the details of his master plan, the titular Book of Henry. And he instructed Peter to give it to Mom after he died. And what is his master plan, you might well ask? Oh, how about this? Since the stepdad is apparently too stupid to close the drapes when he's wailing on her, just point a camera at the window, film his dumb ass, and then post the video online for all to see so he can't talk his way out of it. Really? Well, admittedly, I did just pull that out of my ass right now, and Henry has actually had time to plan. Plus, he's a super genius, and I'm, well, not. So I'm sure he can come up with something better. So what's his plan? Mom will use some of the sizable money Henry made on the stock market to buy a getaway car and a high-powered rifle with a suppressor from a dealer corrupt enough to sell such a thing to a civilian, sneak over to the house while Peter is performing in the school talent show, use said rifle to kill the abusive asshole, dump the gun in the river, and return to said talent show before anyone is the wiser. You have got to be kidding me. This is the solution from the super genius? Murder? I can understand why he wouldn't be too fond of everyone else's plan to do nothing and just hope to God it magically works itself out somehow, but how is this the only solution that his allegedly brilliant mind could come up with? There are only so many ways that I can say, what the fuck? As you might expect, Mom is initially having none of this nonsense.
We are not murdering the police commissioner, and that is final.
That is something that no one should ever have to say. But ultimately, she reads Henry's book, listens to his tape, and decides to go along with his plan because it's the only way, apparently. For the love of all that is good and green, how is this even happening? As if this wasn't bad enough, the entire process of putting Henry's plan into action gets really weird. As Mom listens to the audio cassette with the details on how she should acquire the rifle and learn how to use it to murder the jerk next door, it soon becomes apparent that Henry is so goddamn brilliant, he can predict every single thing his mother is going to say.
You're gonna go right at the intersection. Your other right.
It's goddamn insane is what it is, Henry.
Could. Get all your swearing out. Not in front of Peter.
Boy, am I not buying this. It's like they're trying to keep Henry in the movie without actually keeping him in the movie, and it's just lazy. And of course, they think they're being so cute by showing that Henry can predict everything his mother will say before she even says it. Haha, very funny. But it's really hard to see it as cute when you consider he is literally coaching her on how to murder the next door neighbor and get away with it. That's not cute, that's creepy. In fact, there are many times this movie tries to be cute and charming, but it really doesn't work for two reasons. One, the humor is not very well done. Case in point, this moment just before Peter is about to do a magic trick for the talent show.
Stay focused, stay calm, and remember your Lamaze breathing.
Lamaze breathing? He's doing a magic show, not giving birth. Although that would be a really good trick. And two, it's hard to be cute or charming when the plot of this movie is the girl next door is getting abused, so we're going to shoot her stepdad in the face. I have problems with this movie's sad moments for the same reasons. It's hard to feel bad about Henry's death when he was basically planning an assassination. Terrible lines like this don't help either.
Sometimes I think it should have been me. People would be less sad then.
What child talks like this? I'm starting to understand why so many critics complained about problems with the movie's tone. It's all over the place, which makes this comment all the more hilarious.
One of the things that was a challenge was managing the tone.
Oh, really? You found managing the tone to be challenging? The devil, you say? So we've gone over the many problems with this movie, but is it all bad? Are there any bright spots in this giant cloud of darkness? Well, yes, there is one. Only one. In addition to Peter's magic show, we also get to watch Christina perform a dance number. Because if you're going to cast someone in your movie who's really good at a particular thing, you might as well have her do the thing. And it's beautiful. This dance number is done so well that it feels like it came from a totally different movie. Maddie's performance throughout the film is pretty damn good for that matter. Christina is, of course, hiding a dark and terrible secret, which leads her to bottle up her emotions. Whenever she's around other people, she's very quiet and reserved, almost like she's forgotten how to act like a human. You can see this at the start of her dance number as well. While the talent is there, she's clearly holding back. But as the dance goes on, you can see her gradually loosening her own grip on herself until she finally just lets it all go. It's like watching a flower bloom before your very eyes. Holy shit. Did I actually write that? Something like watching a flower bloom. Yep, I actually wrote that. When the hell did I get so sappy? Well, anyway, back to the assassination attempt. Thankfully, Henry's mom ultimately realizes, holy shit, I'm about to murder the police commissioner, what the fuck is wrong with me, and she backs out. Meanwhile, after witnessing Christina's dance, the school principal is apparently so touched by her performance that she finally reports the abuse. And somehow, the abusive stepdad's brother is magically no longer able to protect him, and when the cops show up at his doorstep, he kills himself. And Christina is adopted by the Carpenter family, and they all live something ever after the end. And this essentially means Henry's entire plan was completely pointless. The abusive asshole is dead, the girl is in a much better home, and Henry had jack shit to do with any of it. Sure glad we sat through an hour and 40 minutes for that.
Sometimes a good story will remind you of who you want to be.
This is not one of those stories. Well, that's the Book of Henry, and it's a book that was best left unread. Sure, the acting was fine and the dance number was fantastic, but those are really the only positives I can pull out of this. The story was 10 pounds of nope in a 5-pound bag, the tone was spectacularly mishandled, I still don't know what year it is, and the film's attempts at being charming were drowned out by the overall creepiness of a woman's dead son coaching her from beyond the grave on how to be an assassin. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why Trevorrow wanted to do this film so badly. Is this really what he considers to be a quality story worth telling? Because if it is, it's probably for the best that Star Wars gave him the boot. I can safely say the Razzie voters made a huge mistake by not even nominating this one. This was damn sure worse than the Emoji Movie. I mean, it's not even close. The Emoji Movie was just boring and lame. The Book of Henry is infuriating. I'm still undecided on whether it was the worst picture of 2017 overall, but it at least deserved a nomination more than The Mummy. It deserved a Worst Director nomination more than Mother! And it absolutely deserved to win Worst Screenplay. And yes, that means its screenplay was worse than 50 Shades Darker. Don't get me wrong, 50 Shades was still terrible, but at least they didn't kill Christian off halfway through the movie and then have him teach Anna the fine art of assassination via allegedly humorous tape recordings. So yeah, the Razzies not even nominating this movie for a single award makes them an even bigger joke than they already are. But this is not the only film that they overlooked. There is another movie that should have at least been on their radar, yet somehow it did not score a single nomination. And we'll talk about that film next time. Until then, I am the Smeghead, and we are not murdering the police commissioner. And that is final!
Violence isn't the worst thing in the world.
What is then?
Milwaukee's best ice. That's not a joke, that shit is nasty.